You're listening to Seattle Real Estate Podcast.
So it kind of seems in Seattle that we're just basically eradicating all crime. We're just basically, if you've got crime statistics rising, get rid of them, and that's how you reduce your crime. Right now, we've got our Seattle Inspector General. That's kind of an oversight position within government. Hey, this isn't going that well. We need to focus on this. Let's take a look at this. We've literally got our Inspector General saying we should eliminate routine traffic stops by the police. Only have the police stop people in dire emergencies where it's life-threatening. That's kind of where we're at here in Seattle. This is literally on the books right now as a recommendation. Yeah, anything beyond life and death situation, don't pull anybody over. Because that's what we're going to get into. That's what we're talking about here on the Seattle Real Estate Podcast. Before we do get into that, if you're new here, my name is Sean Reynolds. I own a couple of real estate companies, and I read the news that hopefully you want to hear. All right, let's jump on in. This is Como News. And it just feels like in Seattle that we're that common denominator is just being reduced. We're all going to get a participation ribbon because we're all participate. There's no winners. It's just, get rid of that law because, it's unfair against that group. Oh, so then get rid of that law as well. It seems like, we're literally headed down that path. How's this going to end up? I don't know. I don't think it's going to be great, though. All right, like I said, let's get on in here. Seattle police should strongly consider eliminating traffic stops for minor, civil, and non-dangerous violations. They're just don't do it. Just don't pull anybody over for anything other than the most extreme of violations. This is the city's Inspector General recommended this. They wrote that this week in a letter to Seattle Police Chief Adrian Diaz. But he got this letter and went, well, that's not surprising. This is not shocking. However, laws are laws. So we've got laws on the books, right? So we're just going to have laws on the books and we're not going to follow them. We're not going to enforce them. Kind of know how that turns out, right? Such stops should be discontinued for the safety of both officers and the public and for racial fairness, wrote Seattle Inspector General Lisa Judge, who is charged by law with helping to ensure the fairness and integrity of the police system in its delivery of law enforcement services. In her letter to Diaz, Judge wrote that traffic stops should be limited to offenses that create a danger to the public, such as reckless driving, DUI, school zone violations, or other similar circumstances. Anything else, eliminate. Don't pull people over. So how about traffic tabs? I don't really like paying for my traffic tabs. If I know I'm not going to get pulled over for a traffic tab violation, am I going to pay for traffic tabs? Why would I? If there's no enforcement, no, you guys are fine. If you're not hurting somebody, running over them or killing them with your vehicle, it's okay. What about not using my blinkers? I'm going to turn left. You got to turn on your left turn signal. Can I just start driving and basically violate everything that I learned at age 15 and a half, driving wise? Those laws that are they're in place to provide for our safety. You got to have rules on the road. And if nobody's enforcing them, if the police aren't enforcing them, how do you think that's going to turn out? Oh, yeah. I don't know, but I'd hazard a guess. Probably not that great. But, here in Seattle, I think we should reimagine and rethink this. And let's just give the roll of the dice to this one and find out. Why not? We're kind of just, possession of drugs. Legalize that. Just anything goes in Seattle. Anything goes now. In her letter, Judge framed the recommendation as a request, then went on to argue that routine traffic stops for minor civil offenses, such as expired license tabs or a burned out taillight, sometimes can result in unnecessary deaths, both to motorists and police officers. Life can sometimes result in unnecessary deaths. Do we get rid of all those circumstances? You're walking along on the sidewalk, you trip, you fall off, snap your neck. Do you get rid of sidewalks? Do you get rid of shoes because you were walking? No, you don't. You gotta have a broad base of what's right and wrong. And if we've been determined that, hey, you got to turn your traffic signal on to get to the next lane so people can see you. If you don't have that as a rule, why follow it? Tabs? I'm going to stop paying for my tabs. I don't like to pay for tabs. I don't think the money being used in the tabs is really what it should be used for. That's my personal opinion. So I'm just not going to pay anymore because they're not going to pull me over. Do you think other people are going to think the same way? It's kind of the same thing that happened down in California, and I've been hammering on this because the corporate response to the $950 and under threshold for shoplifting has just created this whole industry in California of shoplifting. And we've seen it. I've read, those podcasts. And so if people think, hey, you know what, you've got this threshold of things you no longer need to do because you're not going to get pulled over, why do them? Why do them? That's where I think this goes. So, and can it result in unnecessary deaths, both to motorists and police officers? Let's talk about that for a moment. She cited the cases of Dante Wright, a 20-year-old black man who was fatally shot by police in April during a traffic stop for expired plates, along with Darian Jarrett, a New Mexico State police officer who was fatally shot in February during a traffic stop by a driver with an assault rifle, and several others. Okay, because somebody got pulled over, that is not the reason somebody ended up dead. Somebody ended up dead because they didn't follow the rules and somebody got shot, right? It has nothing to do with the traffic stop. Traffic stop is one tiny little thing in the sequence. And if you're going to point at that, I think you're really flawed as to why this is happening. So we just no longer pull anybody over? Really? How about speeding 10 miles an hour over? That's not really putting anybody's life in danger. So can we no longer do that? No longer do that. Washington State Patrol, your ability to pull people over, gone, done. Should we do that? I don't think so. Because you know what? You've always got some jackass going 100 miles an hour down the road. And if they don't think that they're going to get pulled over, I mean, you could maybe make the argument, it's a little dangerous. But if your speed limit's 70, are they going to kill somebody? You're going to have a harder time slowing down. But the argument is kind of the same. Hey, they're not, this isn't a life or death situation. They might be going a little fast, but, you can make that argument. Are we going to go down this road? I don't know. It seems like that's kind of where we're hinting at, right? Many in law enforcement acknowledge traffic stops are inherently dangerous because you don't know who's in the car. You don't know what joker in the car has a gun and might shoot you. That's why they're inherently dangerous, and people don't follow the rules. If they were following the rules to begin with, would they be getting pulled over? That is something to consider. So many in law enforcement acknowledge traffic stops are inherently dangerous, with officers approaching unknown persons, often in darkened vehicles, sometimes in remote areas, without knowing whether that person may try to harm them to avoid being arrested. Do you not pull people over based on fear of the unknown? This is kind of the whole deal of law enforcement, right? You got a law, you enforce it. I don't know. I am just a real estate guy, so, don't take my word for anything. But we're just talking about it. Many in the community believe traffic stops are inherently dangerous for different reasons, especially for people of color, Judge wrote. Judge also wrote that traffic stops for minor violations are a significant infringement on civil liberty. Well, what if they weren't doing something wrong to begin with? Would their civil liberty be, unjustly violated? No, probably not. But we don't want to discuss that. We don't want to discuss that, and should be reserved for cases when a person is engaged in criminal conduct that harms others. There's the gold standard. Criminal conduct. What about if it's criminal conduct that doesn't harm others? We're getting into the weeds now, right? I mean, this is just becoming ridiculous. Stops for government-created requirements like car tabs with nothing but a potential monetary penalty do not justify the risk to community or to officers, Judge wrote. How many times do people get pulled over for car tabs and nothing else happens? I'm going to say most of the time. I'm going to say 99.9% of the time. I mean, it's very rare you hear of, well, they got pulled over for tabs and then they shot an officer or the officer shot them. That's not the way how the story goes, right? It's just not. You get pulled over, you grumble, you argue with the cop. I mean, if you have an argument, I'm kind of like, all right, I forgot to get my tabs. Darn it. Okay. Hand me the ticket, whatever. And we'll move on with our lives. That's how that interaction goes. And yet we're saying, okay, 1 out of 2 million traffic stops for expired tabs ends in somebody doing something crazy and they get shot, right? That's what we're talking about here. Because in most all of these storylines, it's not that the person did a minor traffic offense and that's why they got shot. That's just not the case, is it? It's just not the case. They pull out a gun and the officer shoots him, something along those lines. That's kind of how most of these stories go. In addition, Judge wrote that routine traffic stops are the most common form of face-to-face interactions between police and the community and can impact how community members form negative opinions of the police, which can influence public trust in the department. All right, I think we're kind of looking at this backwards. We've got laws on the books. They're meant to be enforced for our general public safety. And just because some people form a negative opinion because they're continually violating them and they feel like they're getting picked on, do we just eradicate that, you know? So white collar crime, that happens to business guys like me, business guys, owners of businesses, white collar crime. So because it only really happens to business people, that is literally what white collar crime is. Do we say that embezzlement, mortgage fraud, securities exchange fraud, all that, good stuff, because that hones in on a particular segment of society, do we get rid of it? No, it's still a crime. It's still a crime. And because it doesn't hurt people, you can make the argument, well, look, they cooked the books on that company and we got a little securities fraud, but it didn't really hurt anybody. It was only financial in nature. Does that mean that you should get rid of that? Do you eliminate that? I don't think so. No, because those laws are in place for a reason. You shouldn't do that stuff. You shouldn't cook the books on your business. I mean, you just shouldn't. It's illegal. You can go to jail for that stuff, right? I don't know. Moreover, she wrote, researchers consistently shown that Black and Latino experiences during traffic stops are different from those of white persons. Okay. So are we going to change the laws? Is that where we're headed here? I've discussed these issues with others in city leadership because otherwise if you're not enforcing the laws, why have them? Why have them? They don't even count. They're just not even on the books. I've discussed these issues with others in city leadership, and I believe there is support for exploring alternatives to traffic enforcement in ways that do not involve routine stops for minor violations. I'm listening. I'm open to hearing about that, but alternatives to traffic enforcement, what would that look like? I don't really even know. Judge wrote to Diaz, adding that she would welcome the opportunity to discuss this critical community matter with you further. If you can figure out how to get people to still follow the law a different way than what you think is, going sideways here for the community, I'll listen. I just don't really see that being a reality. It's kind of like saying, well, we're just going to send out social workers instead of policemen for a lot of these calls. We're just going to go down that route. All right. Well, that is one approach. It's probably not the approach I would take, but there's different ways to handle different things. If you don't have the fear of getting pulled over and getting a big ticket, why would you follow the law? Why would you follow the law? If you know that you can shoplift something for under $950 in California, nothing's really going to happen to you. What are you going to do? I mean, we know what's happened. Walgreens, CVS, Target, they're shutting down stores. They are literally shutting down stores because criminals have said, all right, here's the threshold, $950. Let's go. Let's do this. Criminal enterprise is set up. So now you've got an entire society saying, well, I don't really need to pay my tabs. That left turn signal at the intersection, I know I should do it, but I just don't feel like clicking that turn signal. That's a lot of work. I want to keep my one finger on the steering wheel and, drive that way like I wasn't taught to do. Hands at 10 and 2 or whatever it is, 3 and 9. However you drive. If you think that you're not going to get caught for something because you're not going to get caught, that's going to be your common denominator. That's your lowest common denominator, and that's where we're headed. Como News has reached out to Chief Diaz and the Seattle Police Department for their response to the letter, but has not heard back. The president of the Seattle Police Officers Guild says he first wants to meet with Diaz and the Inspector General before commenting on the proposal. Be interesting to see what they say. What do you think they'll say? I mean, if you can come up with a different alternative that still keeps, basically the streets safe, I'm all ears. But I just don't see that as a reality. I just don't. I think we're just making everything legal that was once illegal, and then we wonder why it doesn't all work out in the end. It's like, hey, why is this going sideways so hard? Yeah, this isn't the way it was supposed to go. We love our fellow human being. We love them so much that we're just leveling the playing field for everybody. I think we're just headed down this route, and it's one of those social experiments. It's one of the many social experiments in Seattle that is not working out. It's just not. It's not going the right direction. So until somebody can show me, okay, well, here are the statistics, and by eliminating traffic stops for all of these things, you're going to have this benefit. I just don't see the benefit being there. I just don't. I mean, I think this is ridiculous. But a lot of the stuff that I talk about here in the Seattle Real Estate Podcast is ridiculous. But this one in particular, you got an inspector general going, don't stop people unless, they're running somebody over on the sidewalk. What other kinds of things? I mean, there's so many small traffic violations, right? And oftentimes on these stories, you here's how it got started. The traffic standard traffic, they got pulled over. Big, huge drug busts often happen because somebody gets pulled over for a blinker being out or a stoplight, one of their taillights being out. That's how they get busted. So people doing criming, they got to make sure that their cars are good to go. Get a newer model car. You have less chance of getting pulled over and your big crime being exposed. But does that mean we stop pulling them over because we are targeting criminals who are doing criminal enterprise and, that tail light out? That's how they get busted. Do we eliminate that? No. I mean, this is basically backwards. This is backwards logic, in my opinion. So I don't know. I think it's just kind of crazy that we're even going down this road, because I think eventually, with the way that Seattle is gone, it's going to be anything goes. And that's not going to be a good look. You got to have rules. You have rules for a reason, because it's like Jim Jeffries, the comedian from Australia. He's pretty hardcore. We live in a society. We have rules. You have to live by them. You can't just have anything goes. Well, you can have anything goes. We had that in CHOP this summer. We had no police structure. We had no law. We had no fire department. We had no civil structure. How did that turn out? Well, within a handful of weeks, 2 people were murdered. All kinds, a plethora of other crime happened. And then it got shut down, right? That was a social experiment that lasted, a few weeks. So, okay, how long would it take to, just all those petty traffic violations, how long would it take for people to just start driving like, just terrible driving? Terrible. I mean, you wouldn't want to even go out on the roads. I think a lot of people are still going to follow the rules. I'm going to follow the rules because it's just so ingrained in my DNA. Hey, if you're going to turn right, you got to put that blinker on and you slow down and, you do that thing where you look over your shoulder because you might take out that bicyclist that's in or motorcyclist that's in your blind spot. We do all that nonsense for a reason. It's to try and keep the road safer. There's laws there for a reason. I'm going to do that. But newer drivers, if I'm not going to get pulled over for this, let's just roll the dice on that motorcyclist or whomever being in my blind spot. Let's just go. No turn signal, no nothing. Yeah, that's going to turn out well. And then the police will come because it'll no longer be a routine traffic stop. It will be a death on the sidewalk because the cyclist got run over. Didn't see him. Did you turn on your blinker? No. How come? I just don't do that anymore since they eliminated the routine traffic stops. There's no real repercussions. Now I'm up for involuntary manslaughter or whatever it is. When you kill somebody on the highway, you didn't really mean it. It was an accident, yet could have been avoided if people still thought that there was consequences for their actions, which is turn your damn turn signal on. That's the way I see it. But again, I'm an old white dude in real estate, and I seem to have opinions that are differing from the very vocal minority that want to do this stuff. They want to eliminate routine traffic stops. If we can figure out a way to still keep society together and not have routine traffic stops, I'd like to look at that proposal. I'd be very interested in seeing that proposal. I just don't see it as a reality. And I've been pulled over plenty of times, and it always makes you so nervous, doesn't it? It's like, oh, geez, I shouldn't be nervous, but what else is he going to find out that I've done wrong? Are my tabs current? Did I sign my registration on my registration? I got a fine for that, but the cop was giving me a break because I was speeding. I was doing something wrong. I was speeding. I've talked about this before. I was speeding. I was like 10 over. Maybe I was 15 over. I don't know. I do remember thinking, oh, crap, I'm going to get a ticket. So I didn't get a ticket for a moving violation. I just got a really expensive ticket for not having my registration signed. Now, not having my registration signed, I would be okay with that one being eliminated. But then I would have ended up with a moving violation and my insurance rates would have gone up. So in the end, I got what I deserved, and I probably got more than I deserved because that cop could have written me up for a moving violation. He decided to go a different route. It's like, okay. If I would have been walking down the sidewalk and had my vehicle registration in my pocket, not driving a vehicle, and if it was legal to give me a ticket for that, I'd be pretty upset about that because that seems, pretty Mickey Mouse. But that wasn't the case. The case is I was driving a car, did something wrong, and gave me a ticket for something else, kind of let me off the hook, but he still got his quota for, revenue coming into the city. It's like, okay, all right. I get the game. I understand the game. But now if you're going to eliminate all these routine traffic stops, I don't know. I don't really see that as being something that we need, nor is it something we want, nor does this help us as a society long-term have safe neighborhoods. It just doesn't. Imagine teenagers getting out there. Well, here's the thing, kids. You guys can do whatever the F you want. However, don't kill somebody. Don't run over somebody on the sidewalk. In a school zone, hard no-go. Just gotta follow the rules in a speed limit in a school zone. Anything else, the world is your oyster. You want to pop a wheelie on your motorcycle and ride your motorcycle down Main Street. As long as you don't speed, they're not going to pull you over. If you're not doing something crazy, you're okay. If you speed a little bit, it's okay. If you're not really endangering people, you're not going to pull you over. What reason would teenage drivers have to follow the law? It's like if parents don't have rules, guess what happens? Yeah, anything goes. I mean, any parent knows that. And that's why you've got rules. And that's why you enforce them. Because otherwise, the rules have no teeth. And it's just a free-for-all. We don't want that. I don't want that. Do you want that? I don't think so. Now, why am I talking about this in the Seattle Real Estate Podcast? Because rules create the framework for which society lives by. And if you've got communities that don't have any rules, what's going to happen to that real estate? Not a good look. Not a good look. You can think of multiple communities throughout the United States where that's kind of the deal. There are rules in place, but they don't enforce them. How's that go? Ooh, not good. Or they can't enforce them, or they don't have the manpower to enforce them. It's not good. It's not good. And those areas suffer as a result. We just know that. And that's statistics. Okay. That's enough of me talking about our Seattle inspector urging the elimination of routine traffic stops. What world is this? I mean, I read these headlines and I'm like, really? Really? This is where we're going. This is where we're headed. Maybe not in your town. This is what I got to deal with here in Seattle. After all, this is the Seattle Real Estate Podcast and not some other name of some city who follows the laws. I don't know. Pretty crazy stuff, right? That's why I read it, because I think it's interesting and I think people need to know, all right, this is what some people are thinking and here's where they're going with this. I'm a hard no-go on this. If you've done something and you're driving your car, pull me over, tell me I'm wrong, because that's kind of what keeps me in line. That's what keeps me, doing those right things or not doing those right things. Or at least when I get pulled over, I'm like, okay, I was wrong. Give me the damn ticket. I get it. You got a quota to fill. Now I'm late to my next appointment because I made a mistake. I broke the law. That's where we need to be. Need to figure out how to get people to take responsibility for their actions, but that's not the direction we're headed. Responsibility for your actions? Nope. We're going to eliminate routine traffic stops instead. Just get rid of them all. That's what we're doing here in Seattle. Thanks for listening. This was more of a rant, wasn't it? I mean, it's just kind of like, what? How does this happen? I don't know. After I read a number of these stories, I kind of go, that's about all I can take of that, because that is ridiculous. Thanks again for listening. Thanks again for being part of the Seattle Real Estate Podcast. I'm going to keep bringing these things up because I think people need to know, hey, there are voices out there who are not okay with this and not okay with the way things are heading. I can't do a lot about it, but we can talk about it. Let me know what you think in the comments. All right. Thanks for being here. I'll catch up with you guys soon. Talk then. Bye. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell so you'll know when our next video is out.